Chapter 65. Ha! Ma Jogu, who was walking in front, stopped and turned around. Most people call it fire dragon, but very few people know that it's called volcano lava. It seems that you're quite knowledgeable. You actually know what it is. Yan Zixia gave him a meaningful look. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and smiled bitterly. It's nothing. I've only heard about it before. Ma Jogu grunted and continued walking forward. This was his first time walking on a volcano's lava. He felt like he had seen it in a movie. Suddenly, he recalled that the color of the rocks on the peak of Alchemy Pavilion was the same as the rocks outside. Moreover, the temperature on the mountain was very high. Needless to say, Alchemy Pavilion was definitely built on top of a volcano. If his guess was correct, this so-called supporting immortal island was probably just a volcanic island. When he thought of this, he jumped in fright. Oh my God! Volcanoes were no laughing matter. There was no scientific warning system in this era. If one were to erupt, everyone would be finished. Looking at the lava below, it was still relatively calm. Clearly, there wasn't any explosive energy. However, this thing was really hard to explain. It seemed that after successfully building his foundation, he would have to leave as soon as possible. He didn't want to be poked into the sky by a volcano one day. At the end of the stone bridge was a large stone room. From the chisel marks around it, it was obvious that it had been excavated by humans. In the middle of the room was a large pit that sunk into the ground. At the eye of the pit was a large copper furnace that was roughly as tall as a person. Smoke was rising from the top of the furnace, and he could smell the fragrance of medicinal pills. A faint flame was emitted from the bottom of the furnace, illuminating the ground red. Immediately, a thought emerged in Yu Qianzhou's mind. This was alchemy. Using the volcano's earthly fire to refine pills was a good idea. Not only was the fire huge, but there was also no need to use firewood. It was no wonder that Alchemy Pavilion was built on top of a volcano. According to the records on the Jade Archive, the 3 true flames were the first to be used in alchemy. However, this was only a legend. Next was the natal true flames. Only those with extremely high cultivations possessed them. However, using them to refine pills consumed a lot of vitality. Next was the heavenly flames. He didn't know what a heavenly flame was, but he knew that earthly fire referred to a volcano's fire. Lastly was the ordinary firewood. Why did Ma Jogu bring me here? Yu Qianzhou couldn't figure it out. The 3 of them walked down the stairs to the bottom of the pit. Yu Qianzhou suddenly felt a little unbearable. The temperature was too high. Even with his cultivation, it seemed like he couldn't handle it. To be exact, it was a little scalding. After a while, seeing that Ma Jogu still didn't say anything, he had the urge to run away. If he stayed any longer, he would be roasted into human jerky. We still lack an assistant. Are you willing to come? Ma Jogu, who was standing in front of the furnace, finally spoke. Yu Qianzhou seemed to be in a daze from the roasting and felt a little drowsy. His ears were ringing and he couldn't hear what she said at all. Ma Jogu was startled. She turned around and saw his situation. She immediately shouted, "Why aren't you circulating your cultivation to resist? Do you want to die with your cultivation?" Yan Zixia was thinking about the meaning of her great-grandmother's words. She turned around and also saw that his situation was not good. She showed a trace of anxiety. Shocked by Ma Jogu's shout, Yu Qianzhou woke up. He circulated his xinqi and did his best to disperse the heat in his body. His somewhat sluggish and red eyes became lively again, but he still felt hot. He thought to himself, this is more enjoyable than a sauna. Seeing that he was awake, Ma Jogu repeated her words. We still lack an assistant. Are you willing to come? Ah. I'm willing. Of course I'm willing. This was his dream. How could he not be willing? At least it was better than carrying dung all day long. After a moment of joy, he frowned and said, I'm afraid that Elder Fei won't agree. You don't have to worry about Ferdinand. Ma Jiogu looked at the furnace that was getting more and more fragrant and said, this furnace is done. She tapped the top of the furnace with her walking stick, and the lid popped open. A rich fragrance spread in all directions. Dozens of black shadows came out of the furnace. Ma Jiogu gently waved her sleeve and absorbed the black shadows. She then put them into the storage pouch on her waist. His crutch tapped the ground again, producing a metallic sound. The bottom of the pill furnace darkened, and in an instant, there was no more flame. Yu Qianqiu could feel the temperature slowly dropping. He couldn't help but feel surprised. There must be some kind of mechanism installed below. It was really a good place for alchemy. Ma Jiogu turned around and said to Yan Zixia, he will be your assistant in the future. Then she staggered up the stairs. Yan Zixia was stunned and blushed. She understood that her great-grandmother might have heard her words and wanted to help her. She stole a glance at Yu Qianqiu. The latter looked at Ma Jiogu and sighed inwardly. If he didn't know better, he wouldn't know that this person who couldn't even walk steadily was actually a late-stage tribulation-passing cultivator. Suddenly, Ma Jiogu turned around and asked, Boy, I want to ask you something. What's the name of the song you were shouting outside? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head in embarrassment and said, I just sang it casually. Let's call it Ocean's Laugh. Oh. Ma Jiogu turned around and shook her head. Laugh, laugh. I'm old and can't laugh anymore. I'll leave it to you young people. Alas, it's good to be young. After watching the old woman leave, Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed to Yan Zixia. Martial Aunt Yan. Yan Zixia chuckled at his flattering appearance and thought that this person's acting was quite good. He was already exposed, so why was he still pretending? She rolled her eyes and asked, Yu Qianqiu, I have a question for you. Do you know him? Yu Qianqiu was puzzled, but he still replied respectfully, Martial Aunt, please ask. Yu Qianqiu will tell you everything he knows. That's good. Yan Zixia walked gracefully and said slowly, in recent years, 2 songs have been sung in the cultivation world. One is called White Fox, and the other is called Mandarin Duck and Butterfly Dream. I heard that they were composed by a disciple of Ong Guangceng. That person's name seems to be Yu Qianqiu. Do you know him? Yu Qianqiu's expression changed, but he immediately returned to normal. He couldn't let anyone else know about this matter. Otherwise, Fuxian Island would treat him as a spy sent by Ong Guangceng, which was one of the biggest taboos in the cultivation world. He shook his head without hesitation and said, I don't know him, and I've never heard of those 2 songs. I didn't expect that there would be someone with the same name as me. I guess Martial Aunt must have seen him before. What does he look like? Of course I have. Yan Zixia stared at him with a playful smile and said, Not only have I seen him, but I've also talked to him. I've also heard him play the guqin and sing at the seaside. The strangest thing is that he looks exactly like you. Yu Qianqiu's heart was beating wildly. Her words were too obvious. She was obviously talking about him, but he had never seen her when he was in Ong Guangceng. It was very likely that she was lying to him. He said in surprise, "Ah. There is actually someone in this world who looks so much like me. Not only do we have the same name, but we also look exactly the same. Martial Aunt, if there is a chance, you must take me to see him. He may be my relative." Yan Zixia was stunned. She almost said that he was Ong Guangceng's Yu Qianqiu. She didn't expect that she had made it so obvious, but he still pretended that he didn't know. He was really thick-skinned. After thinking for a while, she understood. His disciple was not expelled from the sect, and he secretly joined another sect. anyone would treat him as a spy. This was a taboo in the cultivation world. He would lose his life. She asked too rashly. Yen Zixia didn't say anything more. She said, if you don't know him, then forget it. Let's go back to the mulberry garden. It's more convenient this way. As he spoke, he glanced at Yen Zixia, who was avoiding his gaze. Move in. An image of a disfigured face and a frail figure flashed through Yu Qianqiu's mind, and his heart clenched for no reason. He didn't understand the grandmother and granddaughter's intention. He felt that moving in might not be a good thing. He immediately refused. Elder Lan, I'm used to living with Uncle Furong. You don't need to trouble yourself. I'll live there. The three women all stared at him at the same time. Furong. Elder Lan's face sank. She said coldly, what? You don't listen to me because of that ugly monster. A wave of cold air that was visible to the naked eye assaulted Yu Qianqiu, forcing him to take a step back. He immediately felt a bone-chilling cold all over his body, causing him to shiver. Lan girl. Aunt Lan. Yen Zixia stood in front of Elder Lan. She couldn't help but shiver when she touched the white cold air. She said after the cold air went back, Aunt Lan, forget it. Don't force him. It's the same whether he lives outside or inside. Elder Lan coldly snorted and turned her body to the side. She gave face to the grandmother and granddaughter. Seeing the awkward situation, Yen Zixia said to Yu Qianqiu, you go back first. I'll find you if there's anything. Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed to the three. When he walked past the well at the entrance of the courtyard, he couldn't help but shiver. He found that the cold air from the well was similar to Elder Lan's. He couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. It wasn't worth it to offend an expert just because of a disagreement. After returning and seeing Furong, Yu Qianqiu had something he couldn't figure out. It wasn't just about today's matter. This Elder Lan was all smiles to everyone in the mulberry garden except for Furong. As long as she saw Furong, her pretty face would immediately freeze. Furong also seemed to be very afraid of her. It was like a cat and a mouse. He told Furong about his transfer. There wasn't any surprise on her face. It was as if everything that happened to him was expected. Early in the morning, Yu Qianqiu still had to carry a pole and work. Furong said that since he had been transferred, he didn't need to do it anymore. Unfortunately, she couldn't change his mind. But he didn't have time to do the work of fertilizing. Yen Zixia came to find him. He looked at their living environment and saw that there was only a tattered curtain between their beds. He couldn't help but frown. After seeing Furong's appearance, he was silent for a while and didn't say anything. After working for Yen Zixia for a few days, he found that there was nothing to do. She didn't need his help at all. He was just accompanying her. He finally understood that Yen Zixia came to the volcano cave every day to learn alchemy. However, he also benefited from it. He had learned most of Yen Zixia's craftsmanship. The only thing he needed was some time to practice. If there was anything he didn't understand, as long as he asked, Yen Zixia would be happy to answer him. This was exactly what he dreamed of. He was happy to follow her every day. There was nothing to be unhappy about. Today, Mulberry Garden sent out a notice. All aura refining disciples were to gather in the inner garden. The foundation building pills were distributed to everyone. Yu Qianqiu happily ran to the inner garden. He stood in a row with 7 beautiful aura refining beauties. The 8 of them couldn't hide their excitement. Opposite them, Yen Zixia and Ma Jiugu stood under the eaves with the help of a walking stick. Both of them looked at Yu Qianqiu and smiled. Yu Qianqiu smiled happily. He had been looking forward to this day for several years. How could he not be happy? Elder Lan smiled amiably and said, "Today is a good day." Everyone, don't be excited. Wait a moment, the foundation building pills will be delivered soon. The 8 of them bowed together and said, "Thank you for the sect's help." "Thank you, consecrated Jogu." "Thank you, Elder Lon. If our cultivation is successful in the future, we will definitely work hard for the sect." These were some old words. Everyone had memorized them before they came. But at this time, their gratitude was real, including Yu Qianqiu. In short, everyone laughed very happily. Everyone was very happy. Looking at this scene, Yu Qianqiu sighed. A big sect was really a big sect. How many disciples in Fuxian Island had not reached the foundation building stage? It was definitely not a small number. The number of foundation building pills they took out at once was not a small number. Back in the day, even a large sect like the Azure Light School would only be able to obtain a limited amount of foundation establishment done through the New Excellence Assembly that was held once every 10 years. Moreover, not all of the disciples in the school had the opportunity to obtain one, and some disciples would not even have the luck to obtain one until they were old. How could it be like the supporting Immortal Island? It had its own spiritual herb garden and could refine pills. Furthermore, every 3 years, the entire island would be able to refine pills. This was strength. Sure enough, not long after, someone delivered the foundation building pills. Fei Danan came with a box personally with a smile. The 8 of them bowed together and said, "Greetings, Elder Fei." Fei Danan walked to Elder Lan's side and waved. He said happily, "Today is a good day for everyone. No need to be so polite." He glanced at everyone with a smile. His gaze paused on Yu Qianqiu, and the latter smiled at him respectfully. Fei Danan was startled. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and then looked at the box in his hand. He could not smile anymore. Elder Lan, who was beside him, grabbed the box in his hand and rolled her eyes at him. She said coquettishly, "Why are you in a daze?" The disciples have been waiting anxiously. Chapter 67. The 8 of them stared at the slowly opening wooden box in Elder Lan's hand and immediately smelled a fragrance. Their eyes couldn't help but show a look of anticipation. Elder Lan stretched out 2 slender fingers and smiled as she took out a foundation building pill the size of a purple quail. She placed it under her nose and sniffed it. She looked at the crowd and said with a smile, "It smells so good." Everyone laughed along with him. Elder Lan put the foundation building pill back into the box. Just as she was about to look up, she suddenly paused and looked into the box in disbelief. Then, she glanced at the 8 people standing opposite her with a look of confirmation. "Ferdinand, what's going on? Why are there only 7? Where's the last one? Did you eat it?" Elder Lan asked her husband unhappily as she held the box in her hands. For a moment, everyone who was in high spirits just now quietened down. Especially the 8 disciples, they were even more anxious. What did one less mean? It meant that someone might not get it. When he saw Ferdinand's eyes looking at him, Yu Qianqiu's heart was beating fast. He thought to himself, "Oh no, that missing one isn't for me, right?" He was not the only one who was nervous. The other 7 female disciples were also very nervous. That. Indeed, I missed one person to the sect. Ferdinand smiled and pointed to someone and said, "I forgot about Yu Qianqiu." "What?" Yu Qianqiu cried out in surprise, and he instantly felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. His head buzzed, and his countenance instantly turned ghastly pale. He shook his head with great effort to stabilize himself. Elder Lan's face immediately turned cold. She said in a cold tone, "Ferdinand, what do you mean? You got the person from the elixir refining pavilion. What? You threw him to the mulberry garden and left him alone. Could it be that you look down on our mulberry garden so much?" The other 7 female disciples heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Yu Qianqiu with pity in their eyes. "Lawn girl, don't be anxious. Let Ferdinand explain clearly what's going on." Yan Zixia walked over while supporting Ma Jiugu. The former saw that Yu Qianqiu's face did not look good and could not help but show a trace of worry on her face. "Am I being wronged?" He had personally delivered the medicine, which meant that he looked down on the mulberry garden. However, that brat was borrowed from the alchemy pavilion and is not considered a true disciple of my myriad fragrance garden. I forgot to report him. Right, the alchemy pavilion. Thinking up to here, Ferdinand suddenly came to a realization. He bowed to Ma Jiugu and said, "Jiugu, Bingxue indeed misunderstood me. Think about it. Yu Qianqiu is actually a disciple of the alchemy pavilion. How can I report him under the name of Wanfan Garden? Don't worry. The alchemy pavilion definitely has him. Even if they don't, they can only blame themselves. Just let them refine another batch." "I see, Dinan is right," Ma Jiugu nodded and said to Yu Qianqiu, "You don't have to worry, you will get what belongs to you." Yu Qianqiu also heaved a sigh of relief, but he still felt a little uneasy before he confirmed what he had obtained. He squeezed out a smile and said, "With you in charge, disciple is not in a hurry." "Bingxue, you see, you misunderstood me," Ferdinand said in a wrong tone. Lan Bingxue rolled her eyes at him and sneered, "Who told you not to make it clear?" After that, she held the box in her hand and distributed the fragrant building foundation pills to everyone. The disciples who received the pills were very excited and said, "Elder Xiaolan." Only Yu Qianqiu looked at her with a pitiful expression. Ma Jiugu couldn't stand it anymore. No matter how high her cultivation was, she was still from the qi refining stage. She could understand Yu Qianqiu's mood, not to mention that he was the husband she had decided for Xia. After the pills were distributed, she said to Ferdinand, "Dinan, take Yu Qianqiu to the alchemy pavilion now. The sooner things are settled, the better." "Yes," Ferdinand responded and said to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, "Let's go find your master to settle the account." He grabbed him and flew away. Before Yu Qianqiu could react, in just a few breaths' time, the two of them had already arrived in front of the alchemy pavilion's main hall. Ferdinand shouted towards the inside, "Guan Weiwu, get out here." Scaring the disciples who were about to come over to salute, they took a detour. "Old Fei, did you eat arsenic? Why is your voice so loud?" Guan Weiwu came out with wide eyes. Ferdinand smiled and said, "Look who I brought for you." "Master." Yu Qianqiu saluted with infinite sorrow. "Yu Qianqiu." Guan Weiwu was a little surprised and looked at Ferdinand. "You are willing to return my disciple to me?" "Pfft. Return what? I came to ask you for building foundation pills." "Get lost." The refined building foundation pills were all given to the sect. "Where would I get building foundation pills for you?" Guan Weiwu's voice was not small. "Yu Qianqiu is your disciple and also a disciple of your alchemy pavilion. If you don't give him building foundation pills, who will?" Ferdinand rolled his eyes. "Ah. You want it?" Guan Weiwu looked at his disciple. Yu Qianqiu nodded pitifully. "Oh." Guan Weiwu patted his forehead and said, I forgot, you should have a building foundation pill." Then he said to a disciple who had just passed by, "Go and call Yan Shu for me." Hearing Yan Shu was called, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a little bad. Sure enough, after Yan Shu came, he saw Yu Qianqiu at a glance. The two of them had a feeling of enmity when they met. "Yan Shu, give me a building foundation pill," Guan Weiwu said. "Building foundation pill?" Yan Shu was a little confused and said, "Elder Guan, other than the sect's building foundation pills, the rest have been distributed. Where would I have a building foundation pill?" Guan Weiwu frowned and said, "Nonsense, where's Yu Qianqiu's?" He should have won. Yan Shu looked at Yu Qianqiu and immediately understood what was going on. He was secretly happy. In fact, when Fu Xian Island reported disciples who needed building foundation pills, the alchemy pavilion was the one who reported it to Yan Shu. At that time, he thought of Yu Qianqiu. The latter was borrowed by Wanfen Garden. Should the alchemy pavilion report it? Because the two of them had a grudge, he had the idea of using public office to take revenge. He decided not to report it to Yu Qianqiu. If Wanfen Garden reported it, it would be fine. If not, then Yu Qianqiu was unlucky. Anyway, he had a reason, so he could not be blamed. He did not expect such a thing to really happen. Elder, at that time, Yu Qianqiu had already been transferred away. It should have been reported by the place where he was, so we did not report it here. Naturally, there was no building foundation pill for him. Now, how could this disciple take out the building foundation pill? Yan Shu said helplessly. Yu Qianqiu was a little dizzy. Both sides had actually forgotten about him. He was afraid that Yan Shu had done it deliberately. Ferdinand glanced at Yan Shu coldly and snorted, "Nonsense. My own disciple still needs others to report it. If I say it to others, they will think that I am Yu Qianqiu's master." Guan Weiwu scratched his messy hair. In his opinion, both sides were reasonable. In fact, it was a misunderstanding. He could not help but say, "What should I do? I can't do anything about it." Ferdinand sneered, "Hee, you can't do anything about it. You can talk to Jiu Gu yourself. Yu Qianqiu was personally ordered by Jiu Gu to bring him to you. I can't stand it when she gets angry. Don't blame me for dragging you down with me." "Ah. It's Jiu Gu." Guan Weiwu's face twitched. Obviously, he was very afraid of Ma Jiu Gu. So, he said to Ferdinand in a negotiating tone, "Why don't you take some spirit grass from the 10,000 fragrance garden to refine the building foundation pill, and I will refine it again." Fart, the 10,000 fragrance garden only has a few spirit grass to refine the building foundation pill. Especially the main ingredients, they are very difficult to grow. Do you think the spirit grass is like chives? After a few days of cutting, you can grow another batch. Ferdinand said in a bad mood. This is a big problem. Guan Weiwu's face was full of worry. His eyes glanced at Yan Shu on the side and he suddenly said angrily, "It's all your fault for not being reliable. I punish you to immediately think of a way. Otherwise, your alchemy pavilion deacon position will be handed over to someone else." Chapter 68. Yan Shu, who was secretly laughing at the side, was stunned by the scolding. Originally, he could hide on the side and watch the fun after taking revenge. Who knew that Guan Weiwu's way of thinking was not reasonable at all? He actually vented his anger on him. However, his brain was really good. After a little hesitation, he thought of a way and said, "The refined elixirs are distributed to the disciples on the island, and the rest are kept by the faction. If the two elders find the head and explain the situation, I think the head will definitely make an exception." "Yes." Guan Weiwu nodded. Ferdinand also agreed, "Then let's go." "What are we waiting for? Let's go." Guan Weiwu took the lead and flew away. "You go with us." Ferdinand grabbed Yu Qianqiu and flew away. Yan Shu looked at the three people flying away and smiled evilly. Yesterday, he learned from his father that the few remaining foundation establishment elixirs in the faction had been given out as a favor. Before flying away, Yu Qianqiu subconsciously turned his head to look at Yan Shu. He could clearly see the smile on Yan Shu's face as if his scheme had succeeded. He couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. If he hadn't guessed wrong, this trip would have been in vain. "Yan Shu, if I still can't get the foundation establishment elixir this time, this matter must be related to you. If you dare to ruin my big plan, I swear to kill you." Yu Qianzhou's heart was filled with killing intent. Even Ferdinand, who was holding him and flying, was shocked. With his cultivation and being so close to Yu Qianzhou, he could naturally feel the strong killing intent of the person in his hand. It was not the kind of resentment of ordinary people, but the kind of iron-blooded ruthlessness of holding the power of life and death and deciding the life and death of others. He could not help but look at him a few more times. He thought to himself that an ordinary disciple in the Qi refinement stage could make Aunt Zhou pay so much attention to him. This kid's origin was probably not ordinary. When the two landed in front of the Penglai Pavilion, Guan Weiwu had already entered. Looking at Yu Qianzhou, who looked pitiful at first but now had an ice-cold expression, Ferdinand asked, "Yu Qianzhou, what happened to you?" "I'm afraid we've come here for nothing again," Yu Qianzhou said expressionlessly as he raised his head and looked at the room on the third floor. Ferdinand smiled and said, "You worry too much. The sect will always keep a few elixirs in reserve every time. Since Elder Guan and I came together, the sect leader will still give us some face. I hope it's not Yen Shu's doing." Yu Qianzhou's eyes narrowed as a cold light flashed through them. "Yen Shu?" Ferdinand was taken aback and asked doubtfully, "Are you saying that Yen Shu, the son of Elder Yen Tuo, is playing tricks just now?" Yu Qianzhou nodded and said, "I have a grudge with this person. The alchemy pavilion doesn't have my Zhuji Dan. I'm afraid he did it on purpose." He suddenly raised his hand and pointed at the Penglai Pavilion and sneered, "I hope I'm wrong." Ferdinand looked thoughtfully at Yu Qianzhou, whose temperament was completely different from before. "Old Fei, why don't you come up? What are you doing downstairs? Come up." Guan Weiwu poked his head out from the window on the second floor. "Let's go. We'll talk after we see the sect leader," Ferdinand said. Yu Qianzhou nodded and did not say anything. Penglai Pavilion was still the same. Yu Qianzhou used to dream of getting an office here one day. Those who could have a room here were all at the level of an elder. Penglai Pavilion still looked the same as the government office building in his previous life. But now he was not in the mood. When the three of them came to the sect leader's room, Guan Weiwu shouted, "Is the sect leader in? Come in." The sect leader's majestic voice came from inside. Guan Weiwu pushed the door open. The three of them walked in and greeted first, "Sect leader." When the sect leader Feng Xiangtian saw it was Elder Guan and Elder Fei, he nodded and smiled. When he saw Yu Qianzhou behind the two of them, he could not help but be stunned. This Yu Qianzhou left a deep impression on him. He had almost brought him a lot of trouble. He had also heard about the matter of Yu Qianzhou being seconded by Ferdinand to Wanfen Garden to raise spirit herbs, but he did not take it to heart. Now that this group came, could it be that something had happened? "What are you guys doing?" Feng Xiangtian asked doubtfully. Guan Weiwu was the first to speak. He explained everything in detail, and then said, "Sect leader, just give me a foundation building Dan." Feng Xiangtian looked at the three of them and finally landed on Yu Qianzhou. He said, "No, it's useless to look for me." Ferdinand looked at Yu Qianzhou in surprise, thinking that Yu Qianzhou had guessed correctly, but he still asked, "Aren't there more Zhuji elixirs?" "No." Feng Xiangtian shook his head. "Senior brother, you can't be so stingy, right?" Guan Weiwu glared and said angrily, "If we were outside, even my disciples would have to call you martial uncle. You can't even bear to give a foundation establishment pill. My father even passed the position of sect leader to you. You don't even give me this little face. Bullsh *t. Feng Xiangtian was furious when he heard this. He pointed his finger and scolded, "What does this have to do with master passing me the position of sect leader? How dare you say such words? Your silly master can even forget his own disciples' foundation establishment pill. How dare you come here to make a scene? If it was someone else, I would have thrown him out long ago. There's no foundation establishment pill." If you're not convinced, you can follow me to Heaven Heart Pavilion to argue with Master. Let's see how Master will deal with you. Hearing that they were going to Heaven Heart Pavilion, Guan Weiwu's anger was immediately extinguished and he was speechless. Yu Qianqiu now knew that the previous sect leader was the current sect leader's master. Moreover, he was Guan Weiwu's father. In that case, he did not choose the wrong master. He was actually from the same lineage as the sect leader. Seeing that the gang leader of Fuxian Island was angry, he wanted to say a few words to explain for Master. However, the level here was too high, and it was not his place to interrupt. Sect leader, don't blame old Guan. This matter was ordered by Ninth Aunt. We are really afraid that we can't explain it to Ninth Aunt when we go back. Please help us think of a way. Ferdinand smiled bitterly. Feng Xiangtian was stunned and said in surprise, why does this matter involve Ninth Aunt? Why would she? He glanced at Yu Qianqiu and did not finish his words. However, everyone could hear the meaning in his words. The sect leader's recuperation prevented him from finishing his words in front of the younger disciples. Ferdinand shook his head and said, I don't know. Sect leader, if there are more foundation building elixirs, just give one. It's not a big deal. In the eyes of these tribulation cultivators, the foundation building elixir was naturally not a good thing. It was not even a tonic. Feng Xiangtian glanced at Guan Weiwu, who was standing on the side without saying anything. He stood up slowly and said, it's not that we don't want to give it to you. It's just that you are a day late. Yesterday, we received a Jade Archive letter from the Moon Clan leader, Chonghua Fairy. She said that she urgently needed a batch of foundation building elixirs and asked for Fuxian Island's help. You also know that the Moon Clan and Fuxian Island have always been on good terms. Moreover, Chonghua Fairy personally asked for it. Naturally, Fuxian Island has to help. I have already asked Elder Qin to personally send the remaining 20 foundation building elixirs on the island to the Moon Clan. How do you expect me to take out more foundation building elixirs now? Cabbages, yellow in the fields, lost their mother at the age of 3 or 2, there was no need to mention how bitter Yu Qianqiu's heart was. Tears flowed uncontrollably from his stomach. His life was even more bitter than that of a cabbage. Although Yan Shu was unavoidable in this matter, he could not control the Moon Clan. They were the third largest sect in the cultivation world. How could a disciple in the last stage of the core formation realm influence them? How could such a coincidence happen to him? If this was not a bitter life, what was? Chapter 69. It was such a coincidence. Ferdinand and Guan Weiwu looked at each other, then looked at the dejected Yu Qianqiu and felt that he was a poor child. Elder Ferdinand, can you refine another batch of foundation establishment pills with the spiritual herbs of your Wanfen garden? Feng Xiangtian asked. Guan Weiwu had asked the same question, but Ferdinand shook his head and said, there are a few, and there are still a few main ingredients that are not mature yet. They can't be used to refine pills at all. I'm afraid we still need to wait for another 2 years. Feng Xiangtian nodded and said, then there's no other way, but we didn't do a good job on this matter. You 2 elders are also responsible. Some things can't let the disciples be wronged. We still have to compensate them. How about this? Yu Qianqiu, what do you think about this? Feng Xiangtian pondered and said, in the next 3 years, when the foundation establishment pills are distributed, in addition to the foundation establishment pill you deserve, you will get 1 more, and then 1 more as compensation. I will give you 3 pills at a time. If you still can't build the foundation, it won't affect you getting 2 more chances in the future. What do you think? The 2 elders nodded in agreement to the sect leader's words. This deal was worth it. It meant that other people had 3 chances to reach the foundation establishment stage. Because Yu Qianqiu had effected his first attempt, he had obtained 5 chances. Basically, it could be said that his chances of reaching the foundation establishment stage were certain. I can get a total of 5 foundation establishment pills. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It was good, but it was a pity to waste 3 years. These old guys had no concept of time. It couldn't be helped. They were people who lived for hundreds of years. In their eyes, 2 or 3 years was really nothing. However, things were already like this. The head had also made compensation. If he still didn't agree, it would be a bit too much. He could only salute and said, "Thank you, head." "Okay, let's do it this way." Feng Xiangtian said and looked at the 3 people and asked, "Is there anything else?" Since it was like this, the 3 people had nothing else to say. They naturally saluted and left. After leaving the Pinglai Pavilion, Guan Weiwu, who had been silent for a long time, asked, "Yu Qianqiu, are you willing to return to the elixir refining pavilion with me?" After such a thing happened, Yu Qianqiu felt a little sad and replied, "I will listen to master's arrangements." Just as Guan Weiwu was about to speak, he heard Ferdinand say, "Go back. Yu Qianqiu's matter is something neither you nor I can decide. Old Guan, if you want someone, you should talk to Jiu Gu yourself. Otherwise, if Jiu Gu sees me going back alone, the Slayer wand in her hand is not something to be trifled with. You won't be able to escape." Guan Weiwu was stunned. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Then you should go back to the mulberry garden first. We'll talk about the matter of returning to the alchemy pavilion in the future. Don't worry, I'll remember everything." "Got it, master." Yu Qianqiu nodded. "Old Guan, I have to take Yu Qianqiu back to report to Jiu Gu." After Ferdinand finished speaking, he grabbed Yu Qianqiu and flew away. In a few moments, the 2 returned to the outside of the mulberry garden. Ferdinand dared to fly out with Yu Qianqiu, but he did not dare to fly in without permission. If he did that, it would be disrespectful to Ma Jiu Gu. The 2 of them walked back obediently. When he saw the old man, Ferdinand reported everything that had happened in full detail. After listening, Ma Jiu Gu looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had his head down, and then looked at Yan Zixia, who was staring at him with pity. She sighed and said, 3 years is not long for you young people, but for us old guys, it's not short. But for us old fellows, it's not a short time. I don't know how many more 3 years I can live." Elder Lan, who was accompanying her, said with a smile, "Jiu Gu, you must be joking. With your profound cultivation, sooner or later you will step into the spirit-severing stage. At that time, it won't be a problem for you to live for thousands of years. Bingxue is right. It's only a matter of time before you break through to the tribulation passing stage." Ferdinand also smiled and flattered. Ma Jiu Gu shook her head and said, "The Great Way is ruthless. It's really rare for someone to step into the spirit-severing stage in the cultivation world. I know you're saying good things, but I've lived for more than 500 years and I know my own situation. I don't have any extravagant hopes. I just hope that the younger generation can have that day." After saying that, she looked at Yan Zixia and Yu Qianqiu kindly. From the old woman's words, if she couldn't make a breakthrough in her cultivation, she was afraid that she would not be far from death. Yu Qianqiu looked up and wanted to comfort her by saying that she would live for a long time. However, when he thought that she had already lived for a long time, he couldn't say it. There was a short silence in the hall. "It's all Ferdinand's fault. Otherwise, our Yu Qianqiu might be able to reach the foundation building stage today." Lan Bingxue complained to Ferdinand. Yu Qianqiu had also become Yu Qianqiu. Obviously, he knew what the old woman meant and treated him as one of their own. Ferdinand wanted to explain, but he was speechless when he saw the old woman. "Alright, you can't blame Ferdinand for this. You have a lot of things to do. Go back and do your own thing," Ma Jiu Gu said. Ferdinand thought that it would be awkward to stay here. After bowing to Ma Jiugu, he patted Yu Qianzhou's shoulder to comfort him and left. To be honest, after this incident, Yu Qianzhou didn't know why the people in the mulberry garden valued him so much, but he felt everyone's kindness. Although there was still a bit of self-protection in his subconscious, he finally felt a little bit of humanity in the mulberry garden. Yu Qianzhou, you have suffered a lot. Now, you have to wait for the next 3 years. Ma Jiugu said regretfully, it's a pity that the spirit herbs in the mulberry garden are not mature yet. Otherwise, I will personally refine a furnace of foundation building pills to help you break through to the foundation building stage in one fell swoop. Suffering a lot? Not at all. People are animals with feelings. It was enough to hear the old woman's words. But he couldn't afford to wait. Ang Guangzheng and Chu Ping, who had been waiting for his arrival with great longing. Although he had never said it to anyone, it was a solemn promise a man made to a woman. It was a promise to a woman who treated him sincerely. It was a promise he didn't dare to break. It was not about whether he was a cultivator or whether he loved her or not. If he was a real man, he must fulfill his promise to that woman. This road was full of difficulties, but he must move forward bravely. He, Yu Qianzhou, dared to betray heaven and earth, but he didn't dare to betray someone who was sincere to him, especially a woman who was sincere to him. Otherwise, he would feel like there was a thorn in his back for the rest of his life. He wouldn't be able to eat or sleep well, and he wouldn't be able to rest in peace for the rest of his life. In his previous life, he was able to rise from a nameless nobody to a famous underworld boss. This was all because of his loyalty and commitment. This creed had been deeply ingrained in his bones and soul. This was the foundation that he absolutely did not dare to abandon. Otherwise, he would lose the meaning of living. It would be the same in this life. This was his fate. It was his, Yu Qianzhou's, life. How could he fulfill his promise with his current cultivation? A year had passed, and now he had to wait for another 3 years. Even if he waited for a moment, it meant that Chu Ping had to wait for him for a moment, let alone waiting for another 3 years. His heart was uneasy, and it was difficult for others to understand his heart. He suffered silently. There were some things that needed to be said. In the main hall, Yu Qianzhou suddenly knelt down in front of Ma Jiugu. "Ah!" Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue exclaimed. Ma Jiugu, who was leaning on her walking stick, suddenly opened her drooping eyelids, and said solemnly, "Yu Qianzhou, why are you doing this?" Chapter 70. There is a saying that men have gold under their knees, and they should not kneel lightly. In his previous life, he had never knelt before anyone. He had only knelt and cried in front of his deceased parents. In this life, he had only knelt before his master. So what if he knelt again for a promise? Not to mention that the old lady was old enough to be his ancestor, so there was nothing wrong with kneeling. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Disciple requests a favor from Jiugu. This matter is really difficult to speak of, so I have no choice but to kneel down and beg." Ma Jiugu's opened eyelids drooped again. She walked several steps with the help of her crutch. She stared at him and asked, "What is it that makes you kneel down and beg?" The other 2 women also stared at him. "Damn it! Do you think I like kneeling?" Yu Qianzhou thought for a while and said, "I want to ask Jiugu for some spiritual herb seeds needed to concoct the foundation building elixir." Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue were stunned. Both of them thought they had heard it wrong. It was understandable if he wanted foundation building pills, but if he wanted seeds, could it be that he wanted to plant his own spiritual herbs and concoct pills? There's no need for that. If he waited for more than 3 years, he would be able to obtain 3 foundation establishment pills in one go. Naturally, Ma Jiugu had also thought of the same thing. In fact, she had thought even more than them. "Stand up and talk first." Ma Jogu asked, do you want to keep the seed or give it to someone else? She thought that maybe Yu Qiancho was sent by another sect. Yan Zixia was slightly surprised. She had also thought of this possibility. She knew that Yu Qiancho was from Ongquangsong, who liked to kneel. No one was born to be a slave. Yu Qiancho stood up and said, this disciple wants it for himself. Ma Jogu asked indifferently, grow your own spiritual herbs? Yes. You want to concoct a foundation-building pill yourself? Yes. Refine it for your own use? Yes. This old woman doesn't understand. You can obviously get 3 foundation establishment pills in 3 years, so why did you do this? Ma Jogu turned around and asked, can you tell me why? Yu Qiancho hesitated for a moment, then said resolutely, I promise. For a promise, otherwise I can wait 3 years. I still don't understand. You have stayed in the mulberry garden for a long time. You should know that it is very difficult to grow the several main ingredients of the building foundation pill. Even if you can grow it, even if I give you seeds, you won't be able to grow it in 3 years. If that's the case, you might as well wait another 3 years. I don't know if I'm muddle-headed, but I can't calculate this debt clearly. Yu Qiancho, can you give me an explanation? Ma Jogu gently poked the ground with her walking stick. Yu Qiancho paused, then shook his head and said, this disciple can't explain it clearly. Naturally, he couldn't tell her the secret of the golden pearl. Oh, Ma Jogu replied and walked a few steps with the help of her crutch. She stopped and said, you know the rules of Fuxian Island. Spirit grasses and seeds are not allowed to be spread to outsiders. Yu Qiancho also knew the rules. While he was feeling dejected, Ma Jogu said, speaking of which, you are also a disciple of Fuxian Island. Giving the seeds to you is not considered spreading them to outsiders. Giving the seeds to a disciple to grow privately is not something that has been done. But I can give it to you. Yu Qiancho was stunned, and so were Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue. The condition is that you can't spread the seeds of Fuxian Island to outsiders. If you don't abide by this rule, I will never give you the seeds, Ma Jogu said with her back facing him. Yu Qiancho was overjoyed and quickly said, this disciple will absolutely not give the seeds to anyone. He didn't expect that Ma Jogu would agree. Good. You must remember what you said today. If you dare to violate it, not only will I be breaking the rules, but you will also be breaking the rules. At that time, even if you run to the ends of the earth, I will still crush your bones and scatter your ashes. Do you believe me? Ma Jogu was old, but her indifferent words were filled with unquestionable confidence. With Ma Jogu's cultivation level, Yu Qiancho certainly believed that she had the strength to kill someone else. However, he had the golden bead, and the white fox, who was also in the late stage of passing tribulation, was also in the golden bead. No matter how confident she was, it was useless. However, it was completely unnecessary. Yu Qiancho never thought of giving the seeds to others, so he immediately said cautiously, this disciple, Yu Qiancho, swears to the heavens that I will absolutely not give the seeds to anyone, or I will die a horrible death. In the cultivation world, oaths were the most taboo. What cultivators did was originally in defiance of the heavens, and if they violated an oath, they would often have to obey an oath. This was not a joke. Don't agree too early. I still have something that I need you to agree to before I will give you the seeds. Ma Jogu turned around and stared at him with a smile. There is still a condition. Yu Qiancho slightly frowned, but he still respectfully said, Senior, please speak. Ma Jogu looked at Yan Zixia and slowly said, since you are a person who attaches importance to promises, then this old woman wants a promise from you. As long as you agree to this old woman's promise, I will immediately give you the spiritual herb seeds. Promise? What promise? Yu Qiancho was stunned. Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue also looked at Ma Jiugu, not knowing what kind of promise she wanted. Ma Jiugu shook her head and said, "Promise this old woman first." Yu Qianqiu hesitated. How could he casually agree to this kind of thing? What if she asked him to die or something that he couldn't do? How could he agree to it? Ma Jiugu knew that he had misgivings, so she smiled and said, "This old woman's promise is not difficult for you to fulfill, and it won't hurt you. Moreover, it will give you great benefits. Do you agree or not?" Yu Qianqiu didn't believe in such a thing, but he couldn't resist the temptation of the spiritual herb seeds and timidly said, "If it's really as Venerable Ma Jiugu said, then disciple Yu Qianqiu will naturally agree. Senior, please speak." But in his heart, he added, "If it's something I can't do, then don't blame me for going back on my words." Ma Jiugu rarely laughed and said, "Good. Since you agree, I also believe that you are a person who keeps your promise. As for what the promise is, we can talk about it later. Perhaps there is no need to say it in the future. I will naturally tell you when the time comes. You just need to remember that you owe me a promise." Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue looked at each other, not knowing what this old woman was talking about. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu felt strange and felt that there was a big conspiracy waiting for him. Ma Jiugu was very happy, so she poked him with her walking stick and said, "Little Aslan, prepare 10 spiritual herb seeds for refining the foundation establishment pill and give them to him. Go now." "Yes." Lan Bingxue went to get the seeds with a belly full of doubts. "Thank you, Venerable Ma Jiugu." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. Logically speaking, he should be happy after obtaining something he dreamed of. However, he couldn't bring himself to be happy. He didn't know if exchanging a promise for a spirit grass seed was a loss or a gain. For now, he could only take one step at a time. Not long after, Lan Bingxue came back with a small cloth bag and handed it to Yu Qianqiu. "Open it and see if it's what you want." Yu Qianqiu stuffed it into his storage bag without hesitation and said with a smile, "No need. How can it be wrong when Elder Lan personally took it? Disciple thanks Elder Lan." Lan Bingxue smiled and returned to Ma Jiugu's side. She and Yan Zixia were a bit confused. First of all, they didn't know why Yu Qianqiu wanted the seeds. Saying that he wanted to plant spiritual herbs didn't seem very credible. Moreover, Ma Jiugu's promise was also very confusing. After asking if there was nothing wrong, Yu Qianqiu left the inner garden. When he came out, he saw Hibiscus working. He didn't greet her and excitedly returned to the small house and disappeared. Chapter 71. Amidst the sea of flowers, 2 diligent gardeners were hard at work. The white fox, dressed in white, was strolling amidst the flowers not far away. From time to time, she would bend over and smell the alluring fragrance. Guan Yu and Chen Feng would steal glances at her from time to time. After all, such a beautiful woman was rare. Not rare, but they had never seen one before. The 2 of them did not know that the white fox was a vixen. When the 2 of them first came here, they were quite conflicted. After a long time, they realized that accompanying such a beautiful woman and working in the sea of flowers every day was not necessarily a bad thing. There were no schemes, no disputes, and the 2 of them gradually got used to and began to enjoy life here. After spending a long time with the 2 of them, they became familiar with each other. The white fox also gradually began to talk to the 2 of them. Jing Jing walked to the 2 of them and saw that another piece of land had opened up. She looked around and suggested, "It's best if we can plant purple flowers here." "All right, we'll listen to Miss White." "Chen Feng, let's plant violet flowers here." Guan Yu laughed. Chen Feng agreed with a hum, then turned his head and asked, "Miss White, why haven't I seen boss in a long time?" He was now full of admiration for Yu Qianqiu. He had never seen such a talented young man. I don't know, the white fox replied softly. She looked at the empty bamboo house in the distant forest, and a trace of disappointment appeared in her eyes. What's wrong? Does everyone miss me? Ha! Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared behind everyone and laughed. Guan Yu laughed as well. Speak of the devil. This was a saying he realized when he listened to Yu Qianqiu talk about the three kingdoms. Let's not talk about anything else. Yunchang, Chen Feng, don't plant these flowers in the future. I have something important for you to do. Yu Qianqiu laughed. Guan Yu and Chen Feng looked at the white fox suspiciously. Seeing that the latter did not object, Guan Yu asked, What is it? Ha! Yu Qianqiu suddenly threw his head back and laughed. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing why he was so happy. However, the white fox seemed to hear a tinge of sadness in his laughter and looked at him quietly. After venting his anger through laughter, Yu Qianqiu patted Guan Yu's shoulder and said, Yunchang, do you remember what I told you before? You talk too much. Which sentence do you want me to remember? Guan Yu curled his lips and smiled. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood today, so he didn't mind at all. I've told you before that you'll be able to successfully build your foundation within 10 years. Guan Yu nodded and said, Yes, but I have long since given up hope. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He rubbed his nose and sighed, Sigh. Since you don't have any hope, then forget it. During this time, I learned alchemy on supporting Immortal Island. It just so happened that I got the spiritual herb seeds needed to refine the foundation building pill today. Since you don't want it anymore, then Chen Feng and I will do it. Yunchang, you continue to plant your flowers. What? Guan Yu and Chen Feng were taken aback. Then, they cried out at the same time, spiritual herb seeds. The two of them knew that any kind of plant seeds could be planted here. If there really were spiritual herb seeds, what would it mean? After all, Guan Yu had stayed on supporting Immortal Island before. He understood the situation better than Chen Feng. The spiritual herb seeds on supporting Immortal Island weren't something that could be easily obtained. He didn't have the ability to do it. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu said that he had learned alchemy. If it was someone else, a qi condensation disciple would only be doing odd jobs and wouldn't have the qualifications to learn alchemy. If what Yu Qianqiu said was true, then this big brother Yu really wasn't your average kind of powerful. He, Guan Yu, was completely convinced. Chen Feng, let's go and find a place to plant the spiritual herb, Yu Qianqiu said proudly. Wait. Guan Yu grabbed Yu Qianqiu's arm. The latter smiled and said, Yunchang, what's wrong? You still want to fight with me? You're overestimating yourself. No. Boss, you misunderstood. I just want to ask you a few questions. Guan Yu smiled apologetically. Oh. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, I'm in a good mood today. Go ahead. Guan Yu grabbed his arm and didn't let go. Who did you worship when you entered supporting Immortal Island? The same surname as you, Guan Weiwu. Elder Guan is the elder in charge of the alchemy pavilion. It's possible that you can learn alchemy. Guan Yu gulped and asked again, then where did you steal the spiritual herb seeds from? Bullshit. Yu Qianqiu struggled to free his arm and said, Do you think I'm the kind of person who would do such a thing? The seeds were personally given by Ma Jiugu from the mulberry garden. Ah! The legendary Jiugu who has reached the late stage of tribulation passing. Why would she give you the seeds? Guan Yu was surprised. What's so strange about that? I have a good relationship with her. I'm living in the mulberry garden now and eating well every day. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and said, If you don't believe me, then forget it. I can't be bothered with you. Go plant your flowers. Chen Feng, let's go plant spiritual herbs. Wait. Guan Yu smiled apologetically and said, boss, I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted you. I'll accompany you to plant spiritual herbs. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and said with a proud smile, since we've known each other for so long, I won't argue with you. Quickly find a place and hurry up and start working. He didn't want to waste any more time teasing him. Moreover, he also wanted to plant the spiritual herbs as soon as possible. The white fox frowned slightly when she saw the jubilant expressions of the three of them. She did not believe that Yu Qianqiu had obtained these items easily like he had said. Otherwise, why would he have been so depressed over the past year without showing any signs of it? Boss, what do you think about planting it here? This is the land that Chen Feng and I have just plowed. Guan Yu nodded and pointed to the side of the land. This was the first time he talked to Yu Qianqiu like this. Moreover, it was so shameless. On the side, Chen Feng was so excited that he didn't know where to put his hands and feet. He kept rubbing his palms. Before he met Yu Qianqiu, he was worried about spirit stones. Unexpectedly, after coming here, spirit stones were so abundant that he didn't dare to use them even if he wanted to. Now, he even had the opportunity to obtain a foundation establishment pill. After taking it, he could step into the foundation establishment stage. His old dream. Wait a moment. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand in a very magnanimous manner. Guan Yu and Chen Feng were stunned. They didn't know what this boss was going to do next. Yu Qianqiu held a small cloth bag in his hand and said with a serious expression, refining a foundation establishment pill requires 9 kinds of spiritual herbs. Ma Jiugu gave me 10 sets of seeds for each kind. Everyone must be careful. You can only try to plant it and not fail. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I will get it again. Do you understand? Although he was suspected of taking this opportunity to increase his prestige, the two people involved didn't think so. Instead, they thought what he said was very reasonable. They also said with a serious expression, understood. The white fox, who was a few steps away, pursed her lips, turned her head and smiled sweetly. Yu Qianqiu carefully opened the cloth bag. There were 9 small porcelain bottles inside. He took out one and handed it to Chen Feng. Chen Feng, there should be 10 seeds inside. I also don't know what kind of spiritual herb it is. Try to plant one first. This was the seed of a spiritual herb used to refine a foundation establishment pill. Chen Feng's hands couldn't help but tremble. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and scolded, damn it. Useless thing, why are your hands trembling? If it breaks, can you afford to pay for it? Guan Yu, why are you in a daze? I'm talking to you. Don't just stand there and watch. Help Chen Feng plant it. Seeing him gesticulating and scolding to his heart's content, the white fox, who had just turned her head, turned back again. Got it. Guan Yu immediately realized his mistake. He hurriedly took a bucket of water and squatted down to dig a small hole in the loose ground. He also untied the bamboo tube hanging on his waist and was ready to use it at any time. Chapter 72. Chen Feng removed the stopper from the small porcelain bottle and carefully poured a small seed into his palm. Then, he plugged the stopper back in. The seed was gently placed into the small hole. Guan Yu quickly scooped out a spoonful of purple chaos from the bamboo tube and added it into the hole. Chen Feng quickly covered the hole with soil. Guan Yu scooped out a spoonful of water from a bucket and poured it over the hole. After doing all this, the two of them exhaled and subconsciously wiped their sweaty foreheads. Then, they slowly stood up. The 4 pairs of eyes, including the white fox, stared intently at the small patch of ground that was soaked in water. After a long time, there was still no reaction from the small patch of ground. This was a little abnormal. Chen Feng and Guan Yu looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, how can this be? Did you notice anything unusual about the purple chaos and the water while you were planting the flowers? Chen Feng shook his head and said, no. Quick, look, there's a reaction. Guan Yu exclaimed in surprise. A few cracks quietly appeared on the small patch of ground that was previously wet. Everyone stared in surprise, but after waiting for a long time, there was another reaction. They saw a small white sprout poking its head out. Then, it slowly grew at an extremely slow speed. This speed was almost negligible compared to the speed at which the flowers grew. The speed is too slow. How can this be? Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, is there any way to make it grow faster? Yes. Guan Yu stared at the sprout and replied, if we add more purple chaos, it should be able to speed it up. Boss, do you want to add it? Yu Qianqiu exhaled and said, let's do it. There are still 9 seeds left. At most, we can just waste one. Guan Yu nodded and pulled out a thin bamboo tube from his belt. Yu Qianqiu took a closer look. It was a bamboo tube with a piston made using the syringe principle from his previous world. He couldn't help but smile. It seemed like these two guys were experienced in planting flowers. They must have sped up the growth of the flowers. With Qin Feng's help, the bamboo tube was filled with purple chaos. Guan Yu knelt down and carefully inserted the slender end of the tube into the soil under the white sprout. Then, he slowly pressed the other end of the wooden handle down. As the purple chaos in the bamboo tube was completely poured into it, the sprout visibly trembled, as if it had eaten something. Its growth rate also increased significantly. Guan Yu pulled out the bamboo tube and quickly covered the hole in the ground with soil. After standing up, he looked at the sprout and nodded. Boss, it looks like we can still get another tube. Do you want another tube? Failure is the mother of success. Don't be afraid, just do it. Yu Qianqiu agreed. Guan Yu and Chen Feng cooperated to give the sprout another injection. The effect was very obvious. Although it was still a lot slower than the flowers, it was still very fast. Guan Yu exclaimed, spiritual grass is indeed spiritual grass. It really is extraordinary. It has already used 12 times more purple chaos than the flowers, but it is still growing slower than the flowers. The things that grew out of the sprout were not very good looking. Although it was still growing, it was only the size of a palm. It was still black and didn't look like a spiritual grass at all. Guan Yu and Chen Feng had never seen it before. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, Chen Feng, this is the dirt-repelling grass. It is one of the essential spiritual grass for refining the building foundation Dan. I will leave the bottle in your hand to you for safekeeping. In the future, this dirt-repelling grass will be planted by you. Remember to collect a lot of seeds. Don't let the seeds break. If they break, there will be no place to plant them. Chen Feng nodded. Not long after, a few flower stems came out of the dirt-repelling grass. The flower buds on top of the stems slowly rose up. When they reached a certain position, the flower buds swelled up from the black leaves. When the flower buds began to slightly open, a faintly discernible fragrance overflowed. It was this faintly discernible flower fragrance that completely suppressed the fragrance of the surrounding sea of flowers. It really is a spiritual grass. Just the fragrance of this flower has suppressed the fragrance of the thousands of flowers here. Chen Feng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The white fox gently fanned her jade-like nose. She moved closer and took a deep breath. It seemed like she also liked this fragrance. The 6 flowers had completely bloomed. There were a few short golden hairs hidden in the pale white petals. It was very beautiful. Yu Qianqiu shouted in a deep voice, Yunchang, balance the yin and yang. Pollinate the flowers. Don't waste even a single seed. He had already brought in a few hives of bees. However, because of the purple chaos, the flowers' flowering period was too short. Obviously, there wasn't enough time for the bees to pollinate it. Got it. Guan Yu's movements were light and quick as he pollinated the 6 flowers. He didn't pick one flower first and pollinate it like normal flowers. For this spiritual grass, wasting one flower meant wasting a lot of precious seeds. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the plucked seeds were already in Qin Feng's hands. This flower was also very strange. One flower could bear 6 seeds. 6 flowers were exactly 36 seeds. The few of them happily looked at the plucked seeds. Unfortunately, because of the purple chaos, the dirt-repelling grass didn't last long before it withered. However, the success of the dirt-repelling grass gave the 3 of them a lot of confidence. Yu Qianqiu tested the other 8 bottles one by one. In the end, he found out that ginseng was the easiest to plant. After it grew under the soil, no matter how much purple chaos he put in, it would only increase its age quickly. It wouldn't wilt. The seeds were even easier to pluck. Basically, it would flower and bear fruit once in a year. The seeds could be plucked many times. He also found some problems. It turned out that the diamond fruit was a vine plant. It wasn't easy to grow on flat ground. It needed to be in a place with trees so that it could be easily entangled. One plant could only bear 12 fruits. The fruits it bore were really worthy of the name diamond. Even with a sword, one could only leave a white mark on it. The most troublesome one was the lingji. When the porcelain bottle was opened, they only saw some powder inside. It wasn't a seed at all. The 3 of them were a little dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu had never come across this thing in the mulberry garden. He didn't know how to plant it. He regretted not asking Farong. Maybe she knew. It was all thanks to the white fox. She cultivated in the deep mountains and forests. She had seen a lot of things like this. With her explanation, the 3 of them finally understood. The lingji didn't matter if it was a seed or not. Once it was crushed, it would naturally become a seed. No wonder the porcelain bottle was filled with powder. This made Yu Qianqiu remember some knowledge from his previous life. This lingji should also be a kind of fungus. Finally, under the white fox's guidance, they succeeded in planting it next to the roots of the big tree. After each success, Yu Qianqiu finally let out a sigh of relief. He gave the 9 porcelain bottles to Guan Yu and Qin Feng. 3 days later, I'm going to start refining foundation building pills. I want 100 of each of the 9 kinds of spiritual plants. Can you guys grow them? Yu Qianqiu looked at the 2 of them. The 2 of them looked at each other. Guan Yu asked, "You want so many?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and said solemnly, "I want to refine enough foundation building pills in one go. I don't believe that with a lot of foundation building pills, the 3 of us can't build our foundation successfully." In fact, the reason why he asked for so many was because he had never personally refined foundation building pills before. He didn't have the slightest confidence, so he was prepared to use spiritual plants to build them. He believed that even if he was lucky, he could still refine 1 or 2 batches. Hearing that they could refine enough foundation building pills, Guan Yu and Qin Feng were so excited that their eyes glowed green. The 2 of them looked at each other and nodded. Guan Yu excitedly patted his chest and promised, "Boss, don't worry. Even if we don't eat or sleep for these 3 days, we'll help you grow those 100 batches." Yu Qianqiu happily said, "Good. When the time comes, we'll have enough foundation building pills. I believe we can definitely build our foundation successfully." Suddenly, he frowned and said, "You too, don't just ignore the quality of the spiritual plants just to make up the numbers. Especially the ginseng and the lingji. They must be at least 100 years old. Otherwise, they can't be considered as spiritual plants." This was related to whether or not they could successfully build their foundation, so the 2 of them immediately promised again and again. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly went back. He still wanted to look for Yan Zixia in the next few days to improve his pill concocting skills. Chapter 73. The path leading from the river to the seaside was overgrown with weeds. Yan Zixia and her great-granny would always fly through the air every time they came here. Ever since her great-granny handed Yu Qianqiu to her, she had never come here again. She knew what her great-granny was thinking. A man and a woman walked quietly by the river. Although it was not as fast as flying, Yan Zixia was happy to walk slowly like this. The originally roadless river had already been vaguely stepped on by the two of them. Yu Qianqiu was always half a step behind her, his attitude very respectful. Walking in front, Yan Zixia bit her lips. During the time they were together, they had almost never talked about anything else. As they walked slowly, she wanted to speak a few times, but once she opened her mouth, she couldn't think of anything else. In the end, she didn't say anything. She wanted to take the initiative to express goodwill, but because of her high and mighty status, she couldn't take the initiative to lower her stance. She wasn't used to doing this. Should she take the initiative or not? This question was constantly in her mind. Actually, Yu Qianqiu's mind was also spinning non-stop. He was thinking about how to ask Yan Zixia. He had always been her assistant. He didn't know if she would agree to let him personally refine pills. Damn it! He had already done something as shameless as kneeling, why would he be afraid of asking this? Yu Qianqiu cleared his throat and chuckled, "Senior apprentice Aunt Yan. This disciple wants to ask you for a favor." Yan Zixia hated this form of address more and more. It pulled apart the seniority of two people who were about the same age. Stopping, she frowned and said a little stiffly, "What is it?" She immediately regretted saying it. Why couldn't she change her tone? This disciple is very envious of senior apprentice Aunt's alchemy skills. You see, this disciple has been following you for so long. Even if I don't have any merits, I have worked hard. This disciple also wants to have a taste of alchemy. Senior apprentice Aunt, can you let me have a taste as well? Yu Qianqiu pleaded. Is that it? Yan Zixia's tone was a little disappointed. Yu Qianqiu was really afraid that she wouldn't agree. He asked tentatively, "Senior apprentice Aunt, is that all right?" Yan Zixia was just about to speak when she suddenly thought that this was an opportunity. She paused for a moment and couldn't help but smile sweetly. Her beautiful smile was like a blooming flower. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and thought to himself, "This girl is really hot. If I didn't have to follow Ma Jiugu, this scary old lady, I would find a way to have a taste of her." Seeing Yu Qianqiu looking at her as if he was about to drool, Yan Zixia was overjoyed. If it was someone else looking at her like this, she would probably get angry. She had always been proud of her looks, but Yu Qianqiu had made her lose her confidence. She didn't know that Yu Qianqiu was worried about Ma Jiugu. A man like Yu Qianqiu was definitely not a good person. He had absolutely no immunity to beautiful women. As long as he thought it was a beautiful woman, he would have the urge to flirt with her. As for whether he would really flirt with her, it was completely based on his own moral bottom line. This was also how he behaved and did things. There was no such thing as good or bad. Whether he should do it or not, it was completely based on his own moral view that could be modified at any time. He could barely be regarded as a capricious gentleman. It couldn't be said that he didn't have morals. It was just that most of the time, his instinct was to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. This could be seen from what happened in the mulberry garden. In order to get the spiritual herb seeds, he once wanted to flirt with Yan Zixia, but unfortunately, the conditions didn't allow it. When he was bored, he wanted to flirt with the beauties in the mulberry garden, but unfortunately, the conditions didn't allow it. He also wanted to flirt with the beautiful woman in the mulberry garden, Lan Bingxue. But sometimes, people always had to face the reality. In front of absolute strength, it was better to honestly hide his thoughts. Although Chu Ping played a major role in kneeling in front of Ma Jiugu, it couldn't be helped. Even if there was a little way, he wouldn't kneel. Sometimes, after all, face was not as practical as reality. According to a saying that he learned when he was a soldier in his previous life, flexible strategies and tactics were the magic weapon to defeat the enemy. At least after the incident, he comforted himself in this way. He felt that it was a smart move to kneel. Then why did Chu Pinger have a place in his heart for someone like him? Was it because of Chu Pinger's beauty? No, it was not. She was beautiful. He could flirt with her as much as he wanted. In his eyes, it was not a big deal. The reason was both simple and complicated. In every man's heart, there was a high ground that would be occupied by a woman sooner or later. The more messy a man experienced, the better he would protect this high ground. Sometimes, even he didn't know that it was difficult for others to touch it. Chu Ping happened to succeed. For this kind of woman, men were often crazy. Some men could give up anything for this kind of woman, whether it was money, beautiful women, or power. They could give up all of these things that men loved most. Some people could even give up the throne and the country. In this case, would Yu Qianqiu only love Chu Ping for the rest of his life? Or would he never cheat on her and only be loyal to her physically? Well, God knows. You can make your own judgment. But in terms of feelings, I can guarantee it. Yan Zixia saw that the person she had a crush on was attracted by her appearance, and her confidence returned. Her thoughts also became clear. Don't you want to refine pills by yourself? Okay, I promise you. Yu Qianqiu happily bowed and said, "Thank you, Martial Aunt Yen." "Thank you, Martial Aunt Yen. Don't thank me first. I still have something to ask you. It won't be too late to thank me after you answer me to my satisfaction." Yan Zixia smiled. Her full breast subconsciously puffed out. This was one of the things she was most proud of, and also one of the ways she thought she could attract men. But for her to do such a thing to a man, it could be considered unprecedented. Unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu also didn't notice her seductive action. He was muttering in his heart, "If you aren't a family, you won't enter the same house." This saying is true. This grandfather and grandson pair are always the same when they agree to something. There was no helping it. He was the one asking for help, so he had to hold it in even if he had any opinions. He respectfully said, "Martial Aunt, please ask." After Yan Zixia puffed out her chest, her face turned red. Fortunately, the other party didn't notice. She was vexed and a little disappointed. She took a breath and calmed herself down. She slowly said, "I know you are on Guangsang's Yu Qianqiu. Don't deny it, but don't be in a hurry to deny it. Let me finish first. I don't have any ulterior motives for saying this. I won't tell anyone about your matter. You can rest assured." Damn it. How can I rest assured when my weakness is in your hands? Yu Qianqiu's face twitched and said, "If you have anything to say, ask quickly." Since his identity had already been exposed, there was no need to be polite and call him Martial Aunt. Chapter 74. Yan Zixia didn't know that her words had aroused Yu Qianqiu's disgust. Instead, she was secretly happy that he didn't call her martial uncle. She smiled faintly and said, "It said that on Guangsang once imprisoned a white fox spirit that had cultivated for 1,000 years. I heard that you wrote these 2 songs for that fox spirit, is that right?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned at first. He didn't expect her to ask this question. Then, he frowned. The white fox wasn't only his sister, but he also treated her as his sister from the bottom of his heart. There weren't many people in this world that he really cared about, and the fox spirit that Yan Zixia mentioned was one of them. Someone kept calling his sister a fox spirit. Although it was a fact, he was quite unhappy in his heart. He had knelt down for the foundation-building pill. Seeing that victory wasn't far away, he had to endure this little bit of unhappiness. He suppressed the chill in his heart and forced a smile on his face. He nodded and said, "Martial uncle is really amazing. You even know these small things." Not only did he answer Yan Zixiao's question, but he also undoubtedly admitted his identity as Ong Guangcang. Why did he call her martial uncle again? Yan Zixia frowned slightly and said, "Don't worry. I won't tell anyone about your past. I believe that you don't have any other purpose in coming to Fuxian Island. I'm just curious why you would write songs for a fox spirit. Can you tell me why?" Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "It's purely because she helped me a little. I couldn't repay her for the time being, so I wrote 2 songs for her. There's no other reason." "Oh. Is that so?" Yan Zixia rolled her eyes and stared at him. She smiled and said, "Then, I asked you to refine pills personally. Is that considered helping you?" "Yes, yes. Martial uncle helped me. I will repay you in the future." Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yan Zixia bit her lips again and said with a smile, "I see. I don't need you to repay me. I don't know what that fox spirit helped you for you to write 2 songs for her. I won't ask what it was. If I help you this time, is it worth it for you to compose a song for me?" She then added, "Actually, the song you played a while ago, The Ocean's Roar, was pretty good. Unfortunately, it's not suitable for me, and it's not a gift for me. I only need a song that can match one of those 2 songs." "Humph. First, you told me not to worry, and now you're giving me a request. Isn't this clearly threatening me? How about I give you a song called 18 Touches? It was guaranteed to spread throughout the world. Once a person had a bad first impression of someone, it was very difficult to change it. It was the same for men towards women, and it was the same for beautiful women." Yu Qianqiu had always been a suspicious person, not to mention that he had been caught red-handed. No matter what the other party said, he would twist it a few times. The more he listened, the more he felt that the other party was threatening him. He could not see any affection in the other party's words, but it was true that he was grinding his teeth in hatred. He secretly gritted his teeth and smiled bitterly. "Martial uncle really thinks too highly of me. Since Martial uncle doesn't mind my lack of talent and learning, I will definitely compose a song for Martial uncle. But a good song can't be composed on a whim. Martial uncle, can you let me owe you for now, and let me think about it for a while?" Yan Zixia pondered for a while and thought about it. No matter how talented a person was, it was impossible for him to open his mouth and sing a song that would spread throughout the world. If there was a song like "White Fox, singing about me like that vixen," she should really let him think about it. She probably could not imagine that the so-called songs that Yu Qianqiu composed were all plagiarized, but who would know? "Then let me think about it. You can give it to me when you're done." Yan Zixia nodded. "Thank you for your tolerance, Martial uncle. I will definitely do my best to compose a good song for Martial uncle." Yu Qianqiu said so, but in fact, he did not intend to do so. He planned to delay it day by day. Once he successfully refined the foundation-building pill and built his foundation, he would simply find a song to pass the time. "There's one more thing." Yan Zixia looked at Yu Qianqiu, and a trace of shyness suddenly flashed in her eyes. She said softly, "In the future, when it's just the 2 of us, you're not allowed to call me Martial uncle. When there are outsiders, do as you please." No matter how gentle she was, no matter how beautiful she was. Unfortunately, in a certain person's eyes, gentleness and beauty could not be seen. She had already become a pink skeleton that needed to be constantly guarded against. Yu Qianqiu asked doubtfully, "Not calling you Martial uncle. Then what should I call you? Yan Zixia said shyly, just call me Zixia. That's not good, right? Yu Qianqiu glanced at her suspiciously. If I say it's okay, then it's okay. Anyway, when there's no one else, you're not allowed to call me martial uncle. You can only call me by my name. Yan Zixia was annoyed that this idiot was a little unromantic. She stomped her feet and simply said, I'll call you Qianqiu from now on. If you don't agree, then I won't agree to your alchemy. Her words were so obvious. No matter how stupid Yu Qianqiu was, he could still see some clues. Could it be that this girl has fallen for me? Thinking that it was possible, he laughed and said, Zixia. As long as martial uncle likes it, then in the future when there's no one around, I'll call you martial uncle Zixia. Hearing that he was finally willing to call her Zixia, Yan Zixia immediately blushed. She had never thought about pursuing a man. But sometimes, feelings were just so strange. For some reason, she just had to fall for this ordinary-looking man. She turned her blushing face and said, Qianqiu, let's go. After saying that, she walked away on her own as if she was running away. Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He felt a toothache when he heard that. He reckoned that this matter was not far from what he had guessed. This girl might really have fallen for him. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was unreasonable. This stinky body was not qualified to be a handsome man, and his cultivation was not high. Could it be that she was conquered by his personal charm? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. It was fine if there was a bubbly beautiful Chu Pinger, but there was also a bubbly beautiful Yan Zixia. It was really time to examine his own charm. The only thing he didn't expect was that these two beauties were bewitched by the songs that he had plagiarized. They both thought that he was a gifted man. In addition to beauties who loved heroes, there were also many beauties who loved gifted men. In order to prove his guess, Yu Qianqiu shouted, Zixia, walk slowly. Wait for me. The beautiful woman who was walking quickly in front of him heard his shout. Her shoulders trembled and she really slowed down. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and followed her. He glanced sideways at the beauty unscrupulously and called out with a smile, Zixia. Yes. Yan Zixia replied softly with a blushing face. Yu Qianqiu was happy in his heart. However, one must always be on guard against others. He thought of a guess that he already had and said with a smile, Zixia, actually, I saw you before I joined supporting Immortal Island. Yan Zixia raised her head and looked at him in surprise. Ah. Really? Then She wanted to say, then why don't I have any impression of you? Although she didn't say it out loud, Yu Qianqiu could guess it. He didn't mind it and said with a smile, that day, when I was in 100 Flowers Valley and was about to join supporting Immortal Island with the supporting Immortal token, I saw Elder Qin sending you out. There was also a young man accompanying you. I seem to have heard the shopkeeper address the young man and you as young palace master and young lady. Ah. You were there too. How is that possible? Then why didn't I see him? Yan Zixia blushed again. She thought to herself, what's wrong with me today? I thought I saw an outsider in the shop, but I didn't even look at him. Since he could say it so clearly, it must be him. She didn't expect that the person she didn't even look at that day would be chasing after her today. Hey! You are a noble person with short memories. I am just an insignificant person. Why would you look at me? Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. Of course not. I was busy at that time and didn't pay attention. Yan Zixia explained. I understand. Yu Qianqiu smiled craftily. However, that shopkeeper addressed the young man as young palace master and called you young lady. I am very curious about your identity. You even know my hidden identity. I wonder if I can know yours. Yan Zixia was silent for a while and bit her lips. The young man you are talking about is my older brother. 100 Flowers Palace Master is my mother. That day, I went to the shop to find Elder Qin to discuss my joining supporting Immortal Island. Chapter 75. Ah! Yu Qianqiu exclaimed. He had heard from Guan Yu that the palace mistress of 100 Flowers Palace was the daughter of the previous sect master of Fuxian Island. During this time, he also learned that the current sect master was the disciple of the previous sect master, Guan Weiwu was the son of the previous sect master, and Ma Jiugu was the aunt of the previous sect master. No wonder Yan Zixia called Ma Jiugu great-grandmother. Her seniority was really high. You were doing well in the 100 Flowers Valley. Why did you come to Fuxian Island? Yan Zixia shook her head and said, I don't know the specifics. My father and mother discussed it. My brother went to 10,000 demons to learn spells, and I came to Fuxian Island to learn alchemy. Yu Qianqiu nodded thoughtfully. It was said that the previous sect master of supporting Immortal Island had no choice but to step down because of his daughter's matter. In reality, he had passed the position to his disciple, Feng Xiangtian. Yan Zixia's identity didn't seem to be known by many in supporting Immortal Island. If everyone knew that she was from the Flower Palace, it would probably be impossible for her to join supporting Immortal Island. It was no wonder that Yan Zixia was so low-key in supporting Immortal Island. It was estimated that her brother's situation in 10,000 demons was similar. A son and a daughter joined the number 1 sect of the Devil Dao and the number 1 sect of the Righteous Dao respectively. This was a little interesting. The two of them came to the bottom of the cliff by the sea. Just as Yu Qianqiu rolled up his sleeves and was about to climb up, Yan Zixia lifted him up. This made his pride as a man suffer a great blow. He secretly vowed to succeed in building his foundation as soon as possible. The temperature of the alchemy chamber in the belly of the mountain was scorching. Although Yu Qianqiu still struggled to carry it, he gradually became able to bear it after coming here a few times. It was just that his vital qi was greatly consumed. However, with a large number of spirit stones, he could recover it very quickly. Yan Zixia did not go back on her words. Yu Qianqiu achieved his wish of refining the alchemy personally. The former took out a large amount of common spirit herbs that her great-grandmother had prepared for her from her storage pouch for the latter to use to her heart's content. After personally doing it, Yu Qianqiu discovered that there was a huge difference between what he had learned and what he had learned in theory. Putting aside the fact that he was not proficient in the technique, it was very painful for him to use his divine sense to observe and control the concoction of pills in the scorching hot furnace. This was the first time Yu Qianqiu's divine sense had just entered the blazing furnace when he let out a loud cry. He quickly retracted his divine sense. His entire body's skin had turned bright red as if it had been scalded by fire. As a result, his divine sense had been damaged, and his entire body was dispirited. It gave Yan Zixia a fright. Only then did she remember that her great-grandmother had said that those who had not reached the foundation-building stage or above were not suitable to learn alchemy. Yu Qianqiu took out a piece of upper-grade spirit stone and absorbed all the spiritual qi within it. Only then did his damaged divine sense recover. Yan Zixia's heart ached for him. She told him what his great-grandmother had said and advised him not to try anymore. Yu Qianqiu stubbornly shook his head and said, "Didn't your great-grandmother say that? Although the qi refining stage is not suitable for alchemy, as long as you train your divine sense to be strong enough, you can also concoct pills. Since others can do it, I believe I can also do it." In the midst of his miserable cries, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense stayed in the furnace for a longer and longer time. Seeing him being so cruel and torturing himself, Yan Zixia's heart ached, but she could not persuade him. She could only accompany him by the side and shed tears. Time passed day by day. The time his divine sense stayed in the furnace was not enough to control the time needed to concoct a furnace of pills. In the midst of his discouragement, he was pleasantly surprised to find that his divine sense could actually extend to a place dozens of meters away. He could observe all the movements within a radius of dozens of meters. Furthermore, his control over his divine sense was becoming more and more smooth. He could not fulfill the promise of concocting pills in 3 days. Yu Qianqiu returned to the Golden Pearl and solemnly apologized to Guan Yu and Qin Feng. After repeatedly assuring him, he finally obtained their forgiveness. Subsequently, he stayed in the secret alchemy room for a long time. Yan Zixia also asked for leave from her great-grandmother and accompanied him by his side. His divine sense was injured again and again, and he also took out pieces of high-grade spirit stones to treat his injuries. When Yan Zixia shifted her attention from him to the high-grade spirit stones in his hands for the first time, she could not help but be shocked. If she remembered correctly, the number of spirit stones that Yu Qianqiu used to treat his injuries in the past month was probably more than 1,000. Heavens! More than 1,000 high-grade spirit stones, how was this possible? How could a Qi refining stage disciple have so many spirit stones? Even if she was the biological daughter of the palace master of 100 Flowers Palace, it would be difficult for her to take out so many spirit stones so casually. That was equivalent to 10 million low-grade spirit stones. She grew up in the 100 Flowers Valley, so she knew the market prices of many items. Naturally, she understood how many things this number could buy in the cultivation world. Later, when she saw that he was still able to take out pieces of high-grade spirit stones, Yan Zixia was already used to it. She was just curious as to where he got so many spirit stones from. However, this was a bit too extravagant. Although the spiritual energy contained in high-grade spirit stones could heal damaged divine sense very quickly, a piece of high-grade spirit stone was enough to buy nearly 50 divine sense repairing pills. When Yu Qianqiu was delighted to find that his divine sense could extend to a radius of nearly 100 meters, the two of them had unknowingly stayed in the cave for a full 3 months. During this period, only Yan Zixia occasionally went out to get food and water, but Yu Qianqiu did not take a single step out. When she saw that he was sweating profusely, Yan Zixia would fetch cold water, wet a handkerchief, and carefully wipe him. When she saw that he was tired and did not want to move, she would send food to his mouth. As for Yu Qianqiu, since he knew that Yan Zixia liked him, he enjoyed it with peace of mind, as if taking care of him was what he should do. From the beginning when his divine sense was injured, to a muffled groan, to a slight frown, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense could already stay in the pill furnace for a day. Although Yan Zixia had not experienced the pain of divine sense being injured, she had heard people say that it was much more painful than physical injuries. She could not figure out why he was doing this, and when she could not bear to see it, she advised him to stop more than once. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would say with a slight smile, "How can you see the rainbow without experiencing the wind and rain? If you want to do something, how can you not suffer a little? Not everything can be achieved easily. Men. Sometimes, not only do you have to be ruthless to others, if you want to succeed, you have to be even more ruthless to yourself." Although he said it very easily, Yan Zixia's heart trembled, and she looked at him with a complicated expression. In the future, she did not advise him again, and only did what she thought she should do, taking care of him with all her heart. If this matter was seen by people who knew her identity, they would probably be dumbfounded. The dignified 100 Flower Palace's young miss actually did this kind of thing to serve others. However, Yu Qianqiu did not think so. He only knew that people would pay attention to their status when they got married, and they would pay attention to the fact that their families were well matched. What did dating have to do with status? The ordinary spiritual herbs used in 3 months could be counted as piles. Fortunately, supporting a mortal island had a lot of such spiritual herbs, so no one would care about it. Unfortunately, the success rate of his alchemy was still very low. He could barely make one furnace out of 20, and at most 10 pills in one furnace. They were all ordinary pills used in the cultivation world to treat external injuries. According to his success rate, even if he went out to refine pills for people for free, he was afraid that people would be scared away. The price of refining a furnace of pills was too high. However, Yu Qianqiu felt that it was almost enough. He estimated that 100 sets of spiritual herbs could at least make 3 or 4 furnaces. Moreover, with enough spiritual herbs as a backing, it was time to refine foundation-building pills. He decided to rest for a day and adjust his mental state to its peak before he started refining. Chapter 76. On the way back along the river, Yu Qianqiu glanced at the curvaceous figure beside him. He couldn't help but feel lustful and gradually moved closer to her. During the time in the cave, he had touched Yan Zixia many times, but he only took advantage of her. For example, he touched her buttocks, sneakily attacked her breasts, and so on. It was lonely in the cave. Under the circumstance that Yan Zixia couldn't resist strongly, Boss Yu naturally enjoyed these little tricks, which made Yan Zixia feel ashamed and resentful. She didn't expect him to be so bold, but she couldn't do anything about it. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu's mind was focused on learning to refine elixirs, so he didn't do anything more excessive. After being cooped up in the cave for 3 months, their relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. It was not easy for them to come out and relax. Naturally, a certain someone's lust was aroused. Just as he was considering whether to eat Yan Zixia right now, a demonic claw quietly lifted up and was about to pat her perky buttocks. What? Yan Zixia suddenly looked up to the sky. Yu Qianqiu forgot to do anything and also looked up. There were 2 people flying in the direction of Penglai Pavilion on their swords. Yan Zixia turned her head and asked, Qianqiu, do you see the 2 people on the sword? Judging from their clothes, they seem to be Ong Guangsung's disciples. What are they doing here? They didn't fly fast on their swords. Obviously, Fuxian Island was their destination. Yu Qianqiu was very familiar with Ong Guangsung's clothes, so he recognized the 2 people at a glance. They were Ong Guangsung's disciples. He retracted his demonic claw inadvertently and frowned. He shook his head and said, I don't know, but it shouldn't be for me. After this incident, he lost the interest to do evil. When the 2 returned to the mulberry garden and were about to separate, Yu Qianqiu urged, Zixia, if possible, can you help me ask Ong Guangsung's disciples why they are here? Okay. Yan Zixia nodded lightly and called out to him, who was about to turn and leave. She said shyly, Qianqiu, when will you move into the inner garden? I'll help you tell Auntie Lan. Why do you want to live in the inner garden? Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He pointed at Furong who was busy in the garden and said, no need to trouble yourself. I am already used to living together with Marshall and Furong. That's all. See you tomorrow. As he said that, he turned around and walked towards the spiritual herb field, and shouted with a grin, Marshall Uncle Furong, do you need help? Yan Zixia stared blankly at Yu Qianqiu, who was rushing to do the work. She stood there for a while and murmured, have you gotten used to living with her? She sighed faintly and returned to the inner garden. Right after she left, Lan Bingxue walked out from the gate of the inner garden slowly. She looked at Yan Zixia who had disappeared into the inner garden, then at the man and the woman in the spiritual herbs field, and frowned. Furong couldn't dissuade Yu Qianqiu, so she had to give the thing in her hand to Yu Qianqiu. Looking at the man who was bowing and busy in front of her, she thought that she hadn't seen him for 3 months. It was so good to see him again. He should be her only friend in the mulberry garden. The expression on her disfigured face changed. From the half of her face, it could be seen that she smiled, although the smile was a bit scary. After they finished their work, you carried the pole and I carried the ladle, and they went back to their own nest. Yu Qianqiu disappeared from his bed without any hesitation. Furong just glanced at him. She was curious about Yu Qianqiu's behavior, but she was already used to it. As soon as Yu Qianqiu went back to the golden bead, he was shocked. Guan Yu was feeding a red pony. Where did this pony come from? Was there another passage in the golden bead that led to the outside? This was his nest to protect his life. Guan Yu also noticed him. He waved at him and said with a smile, "Boss, come and see my red rabbit." Yu Qianqiu walked over with a calm face and asked, "Where did you get this pony?" Guan Yu laughed and said, "I really didn't expect it. Boss, do you remember the 2 horses that we sent to the 100 Flowers Valley last time? Hee, it turned out to be a male and a female. This little fellow was born from them." Oh. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. So it was like this. The pony was very cute. Its red fur was glossy and smooth. Its beautiful big eyes blinked. Seeing a stranger coming, it wasn't afraid. It turned its head to look at them, neighed, and swung its ponytail twice, as if it was greeting them. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, "It's really beautiful." "Yunchang, is it male or female?" "Of course it's male." Guan Yu said proudly. "Tsk. Yu Qianqiu walked over and touched its smooth fur. He said, "It's still a handsome guy." Suddenly, he saw the radish in Guan Yu's hand that he was feeding the pony. He was startled and asked doubtfully, "Yunchang, did you sell radish seeds when you went to the 100 Flowers Valley last time?" "Radish?" Guan Yu was stunned. He looked at the thing in his hand and said with disdain, "This is a radish." "Boss, don't tell me you can't even recognize ginseng. How can I feed radish to the future red rabbit horse? Only you can think of that." "Ginseng?" Yu Qianqiu touched his nose and said with a smile, "This ginseng that hasn't been dried looks like a radish." Needless to say, this ginseng was definitely grown from the seeds that he brought. However, using ginseng to feed a horse was indeed a little too extravagant. "Red Rabbit, come here." Someone called out softly. The 2 of them turned their heads and saw the white fox holding a bunch of lush green grass in its hand, calling out to it. The little red rabbit sneezed and turned its head to look. It let out a happy cry and turned its small body around. It raised its 4 shiny black hooves and ran. This little fellow still knew how to be protective of the fairer sex. It knew that fresh flowers shouldn't be stepped on, so it turned a corner and ran through the field. Guan Yu held the half of the ginseng and complained, "Heartless fellow." Yu Qianqiu chuckled at the side. Just as he was about to get down to business, Chen Feng's angry voice came from the forest. He roared, "Guan Yu, you bastard, you stole my ginseng to feed the horse again." "What happened?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Yu smiled awkwardly, "Nothing much. That Chen Feng brat is too stingy. Pulling out 2 ginseng to feed the red rabbit already makes my heart ache." Yu Qianqiu let out an "oh" sound and didn't mind. With the existence of the purple chaos, pulling out 2 ginseng to feed the horse was indeed nothing. Moreover, that little fellow was too cute. It deserved to eat something good to nourish itself. Sigh. If he had known earlier, he would have given the task of planting ginseng to Guan Yu. However, Chen Feng's attitude was completely different from the other 2. He ran over and rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was going to fight to the death with Guan Yu. Guan Yu couldn't be compared to Yu Qianqiu and the white fox. Chen Feng's current cultivation level was the same as his, so if they were to fight, it was hard to say who would have the upper hand. However, as the boss, Yu Qianqiu naturally couldn't watch his 2 little brothers fight in front of him. He separated them in the middle and shouted, "Chen Feng, what are you doing? We are all brothers. Do you need to fight to pull out 2 ginseng? 2 ginseng?" Chen Feng pointed at Guan Yu and said angrily, "If it was just 2 normal ginseng, I wouldn't have said anything. But the ginseng that this bastard pulled out were all 100-year-old ginseng that I had painstakingly planted. Those were all prepared for concocting the foundation building pill. For that stupid horse, he stole close to 100-year-old ginseng from me in the past 2 months. This is intolerable. Stole close to 100-year-old ginseng to feed to the horse. The muscles on Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. 2 black lines appeared on his forehead. He stared angrily at Guan Yu. No one can ruin my grand plan of building my foundation. Guan Yu smiled awkwardly and said, "That. Boss, let me explain. Didn't you see that after my scarlet rabbit ate the 100-year-old ginseng, its fur became bright and full of spiritual energy? I thought my ass. Chen Feng, beat this bastard to death for me," Yu Qianzhou said while gnashing his teeth. 2 figures pounced at Guan Yu. Under the rather angry punches and kicks, the latter let out a blood-curdling scream. Chapter 77. Yu Qianzhou was fighting to his heart's content when he suddenly sensed something charging over. He didn't hurry to turn around and instead turned around to sweep his leg. With a bang sound, the colt was sent flying. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. The foal struggled to get up from the ground and charged at Chen Feng, who was punching and kicking. "Stupid horse, you ate my ginseng and still dare to help the evildoer. F***CKU. Yu Qianzhou kicked the horse again and helped Chen Feng out. "Stop!" The white fox shouted and her figure appeared in front of them. With the white fox speaking, Yu Qianzhou and Chen Feng didn't dare to make a move. The 2 of them cursed and stood to the side. The white fox told them to stop but didn't tell them to stop. Instead, the foal got up and ran to Guan Yu, who was sitting on the ground with his hands on his head. It bit on his green robe and gently pulled. "Hey! This stupid horse can really take a beating. A normal adult horse wouldn't be able to take 2 kicks from me. Looks like I didn't eat ginseng for nothing. Ha, it's a little intelligent now. It knows how to protect its owner at such a young age," Yu Qianzhou said to Chen Feng. Chen Feng replied with yes and yes. The white fox then rolled her eyes at them. The 2 of them chuckled and shut up. Seeing that the white fox had arrived, the badly battered Guan Yu finally felt relieved and stood up. He stroked the 3 strands of his long beard that had been messed up and patted the footprints on his green robe. He looked at the 2 assailants resentfully and knew that he was in the wrong first. Without saying anything else, he muttered, "Boss, it's fine if you hit me, but why didn't you let go of such a small horse?" Ha! This man and horse were really interesting. Yu Qianzhou laughed and scolded, "Damn, is your horse more important or us foundation establishment? You're crazy. I don't want to waste time with you. You 2 prepare 100 sets of spirit herbs for the foundation establishment pill. I, your boss, will start concocting pills tomorrow." "Really?" Chen Feng said happily. Guan Yu had also forgotten about being beaten up just now. He opened his eyes wide in excitement. "Yes. I've finally found a suitable place to concoct pills. I can start now," said Yu Qianzhou with a smile. He wasn't going to tell her that the previous 3-day appointment was because his skills weren't up to par. He made up a lie and said that he hadn't found a good place to concoct pills. As for the fact that he had suffered so much to learn alchemy, he was even less likely to mention it. If he did, it would really damage the prestige of his boss. Both of them nodded and went to prepare the spiritual herbs without saying anything else. The colt limped along with Guan Yu, who had just been beaten. Yu Qianzhou gritted his teeth at the sight of it and scolded jokingly, "Lousy horse." The white fox's slender and fair neck gently twisted as she looked at him and said, "As far as I know, it's not easy for aura condensation cultivators to concoct panaceas. Have you really learned it?" Look at what big sister is saying. Don't you know whose little brother I am? How could such a small matter stump me? Of course, I've really learned it. Yu Qianqiu said proudly. The white fox turned around and looked at the sea of flowers. She said lightly, the fire in the cauldron is very strong. Your cultivation is only at the late stage of aura condensation. In order to learn alchemy, your divine sense must have suffered a lot. There are quite a lot of high-grade spirit stones in that pile of spirit stones. With her cultivation level, she naturally wouldn't be able to hide the fact that something was missing in this area. Only a few people knew the pain of having their divine sense injured. Even though they had endured it, Yu Qianqiu still felt a lingering fear when he thought about it. He smiled unnaturally and looked at the sea of flowers. He changed the topic and said, Big sister, look at the beautiful flowers in this golden pearl. The scenery is really good. I keep calling it golden pearl, golden pearl. It's really a bit hard to pronounce. Big sister, why don't you give this place a name? The white fox shook her head lightly. A strand of hair hanging down her forehead was tucked behind her ear. She said slowly, I can't. Little brother is brimming with talent. You should name it. I'm brimming with talent. Yu Qianqiu knew his own limitations. However, the feeling of being praised by a beauty was really good. His mood also became better. He opened his arms facing the sea of flowers. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath of the fragrance. He exhaled and opened his eyes. In the far west, there is a legendary ideal world called Utopia. I hope that one day, Golden Pearl can also become a legend and become an ideal world. Big sister, how about Utopia? Utopia. The white fox carefully thought about it. She frowned unconsciously. To be honest, she didn't think that there was anything nice about this name. In fact, it was a bit strange. However, she still nodded. She looked at the sea of flowers that was brimming with fragrance. She smiled and said, Ideal world. I hope that I can live peacefully like this. This is my ideal world. Let's call it Utopia according to little brother. Yu Qianqiu smiled. He suddenly tilted his head and asked, Big sister, do you have a name? The white fox looked at him in surprise. When she turned back, her eyes were filled with confusion. A scene that had been buried for a long time came to her mind again. The scholar clumsily used a knife to cut a thorn hairpin. He made a few cuts on his hand. The faint red on the thorn hairpin was his blood. He used his sleeve to wipe it, but the red seemed to never be wiped off. The scholar happily held the thorn hairpin and ran over. He smiled and said, Little Bai, look. I made this for you. Come, let me put it in for you. In fact, she saw the whole process of his clumsiness. She nodded her head shyly. She tied up her hair and let him put the thorn hairpin in her hair. The scholar looked at it carefully and smiled. Little Bai, you look really good. Little Bai, let me give you a name. She looked at him happily and nodded her head. The scholar looked at the hairpin and thought for a while. He said, Since you are called Little Bai, I will name you White Jingmyang. What do you think? Do you like it? She nodded her head and said, I like it. The scholar smiled with satisfaction. It had been more than 200 years. The scholar was long gone. The hairpin was lost in the fierce battle in the capital city. It could not be found anymore. Perhaps it really was just a dream of lovers and butterflies. Since it was a dream, there would come a day when they would wake up. Should I wake up? Maybe I have already woken up. White Fox opened his mouth and let out a breath. A different expression flashed in his eyes. He looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was waiting for his answer. He shook his head and sighed, perhaps. It has been a long time. I forgot and can't remember. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It was a troublesome thing for people to live for so long. She even forgot her own name. He touched his nose and smiled. Anyway, I have given Jinju a name today. Big sister, why don't I give you a name too? The white fox agreed with a soft "n" sound. She had a heavy responsibility. She must give her a name worthy of her beauty. Yu Qianqiu walked around with his hands behind his back. Her surname was Bai, but what should she be called? The more he thought about it, the more he couldn't figure it out. After a long time, he scratched his head, but he still couldn't figure it out. Could she be called by Meili or by Pretty Beauty? If she came up with this name, he could really be called an idiot. Yu Qianqiu painfully shook his head. He looked at the sea of flowers swaying in the wind. He wondered if Bai Xianhua would like it or not. After a moment of silence, he looked at the peerless beauty standing there with shame. He sighed. Ah! An idea flashed in his mind. A person from the myths and legends from his previous life appeared in front of him. She was also a beautiful and infatuated demon who had cultivated for 1,000 years. But she was a snake demon. Yu Qianqiu painfully groaned. Didn't they say that he was talented? Could it be that his talent could only be plagiarized? Depressing. Big sister, I thought of a name. I don't know if you like it. Bai Suzhen. What do you think? If it doesn't work, let me think again. Yu Qianqiu added. Su as in simple, Zhen as in loyal. Bai Suzhen. Bai Suzhen. The white fox frowned. After pondering for a while, she turned around and floated away. It seemed that she didn't like it. Yu Qianqiu felt bored. After thinking about it, he came to a sudden realization. He really wanted to slap himself twice. He really had nothing better to do. Why did he have to mention loyalty? She had finally forgotten about her past with great difficulty. Wasn't he intentionally reminding her? Thank you, little brother. I will be called Bai Suzhen from now on. The white fox's voice floated over with the fragrance of flowers. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Chapter 78. Not long after, Guan Yu and Chen Feng each came back with a bag of spiritual herbs. Yu Qianqiu took them and weighed them in his hand before asking, "Is 100 enough?" "Yes. It's quite a lot." Yu Qianqiu directly poured the spiritual herbs into the storage bag and threw the 2 bags back to the 2. He smiled and said, "Continue to plant the spiritual herbs. Just wait for my good news." The 2 were so excited that they wanted to say some flattering words, but he had already disappeared. When he returned to the small house in the mulberry garden, the sky was not dark yet. Yu Qianqiu immediately fell asleep. He had to prepare for the next day. He slept until the sky was still dark. When he heard the sound of Hibiscus getting up, he knew that she was going to work. He also woke up to help. Hibiscus couldn't refuse his kindness. The 2 were like before, one carrying a pole and the other carrying a ladle. They swayed out of the mulberry garden. They didn't know that Elder Lan was staring at them with a frosty face not far away in the night. The 2 were busy until the sky was slightly bright. Yu Qianqiu stood guard at the entrance of the inner garden of the mulberry garden. When there were people coming out of the garden in 2s and 3s, Yan Zixia also came out. The 2 tacitly left the mulberry garden and walked in the direction of the river. Hibiscus, who was busy in the garden, looked at their figures. She bit her lips and subconsciously raised her hand to touch the half of her face that was already disfigured. After the 2 walked along the river for a long distance, Yu Qianqiu turned his head and looked around. When he saw that there was no one, he chuckled and said, "Zixia, did you find out about Onquangsong?" "Yes." Yan Zixia nodded and said, "I asked Aunt Lan." Ong Kwang-sung's disciple coming here has nothing to do with you. He's here to send an invitation to Fujian Island to participate in the exorcism conference. Exorcism conference. What does it do? Why haven't I heard of it? Yu Qianqiu asked. Aunt Lan said that it's a conference led by Ong Kwang-sung. It seems that they're preparing to set up an organization that specializes in eradicating the demonic path. Aunt Lan didn't tell me the details, Zixia said. Ong Kwang-sung will take the lead. Hey! This Ong Kwang-sung is really jumping higher and higher. Since when did they have the right to lead the cultivation world? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and laughed. Yan Zixia admitted, Ong Kwang-sung has been very domineering in recent years. Last year, he even caused trouble in our 100 Flowers Valley. What happened? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. As far as I know, although your 100 Flowers Valley is neither righteous nor demonic, it's not considered demonic either. What's Ong Kwang-sung doing in the 100 Flowers Valley? The effect of the dirt-dispelling grass was to remove the impurities in the spirit dawn, and the step of fusing it with other spiritual herbs was not something that could be avoided. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.